Wartime, written by Juliet Gardner. Read by Fiona Shaw with the voices of Gareth Armstrong, Sandra Duncan, Stephen Kinman and Jenny Ogilvie. CD 1.
The sun is shining. The garden never looked lovelier. Everything is in bloom. Our cat, Tiger, lies there in the sun. All looks happy and peaceful. But it's not. War has broken out between England and Germany. Beastly, beastly war.
These words were written by a 24-year-old civil servant living in Croydon on the 3rd of September 1939, and churchgoers who had gone to Matins that Sunday morning had left a nation at peace. When they emerged from church into the noonday sun, Britain was at war. At 11:15 that morning, people gathered round their wireless sets to hear Chamberlain's metallic tones announcing that the fretful dance of diplomacy to avoid war was over. No reply to Britain's ultimatum to Hitler that his troops must withdraw from Poland had been received by the 11 a.m. deadline. In Kintyre, the writer, Naomi Mitchelson, was at home with her husband Dick and son Denny. As she listened to Chamberlain, she thought that he sounded like a very old man.
At the end, Joan, a house-guest, said, "How could he ask God to bless us?" As God Save the King started, Denny turned it off, and someone said, "Thank you." I told Annie, the housekeeper, who was wonderfully cheerful and said she remembered the Boer War, and Bella, the cook, who said, "Isn't that heartbreaking?" After a bit she began to cry, a saucepan in her hands, and said, "Think of all our men going." Then to me, "Of course you've got boys too." Dick said, "Think of the women in Germany all saying that too." But there was no response. Then she asked, "When will they send our men over?" But none of us had much idea.
Following Chamberlain's broadcast, a series of short official announcements instructed listeners that the blowing of whistles or blaring of horns was now forbidden, since these could be mistaken for an air raid siren. They were also told that all theatres, cinemas, music halls and other places of entertainment were to be closed forthwith, and football matches and other events that attracted large crowds were forbidden. Measures intended to minimise the chances of a large number of people being killed by a single bomb. Every citizen was then warned of his or her wartime responsibilities: to observe the blackout from dusk till dawn, to listen regularly to the BBC news broadcasts, to carry a gas mask everywhere, to make sure every member of the family was labelled with his or her name and address, and when the air raid siren sounded, to go immediately to a shelter and stay there until the all clear sounded. As she was walking along Upper Street in Islington, North London, Eileen Harmer heard the siren. She and the friends she was with made a dash for the public shelter erected on Islington Green.
As we went in, an ARP warden yelled, "Mind those electric wires," and we realised that the shelter was still being built. I wondered how many more up and down the country weren't ready yet now that the war had started.
The alert had been a false alarm, the first of several. A sole French plane flying along the Thames had been mistaken for the vanguard party of a German attack. It lasted 20 minutes. When the all clear sounded, people emerged and got on with their Sundays, interspersing their usual late summer Sabbath activities: a walk, a rest after lunch, the Sunday papers, writing letters, tidying up the garden, with the imperatives of war concerned with blackout and shelter provision, air raid prevention duties, anxiety. Chamberlain picked up his gas mask in its new shiny black leather case, put on his Homburg hat, and walked the few hundred yards from Downing Street to the House of Commons. He told MPs of his intense feelings.
This is a sad day for all of us, but to none is it sadder than to me. Everything I have worked for, everything that I have hoped for, everything that I have believed in during my public life has crashed in ruins.
At the end of the day that war was declared, the king went to bed alone. The Queen had decided to return to Balmoral that day to explain to her daughters as best she could what was happening. Hannah Hodson had been dozing in an armchair. She found
This dimmed lighting is very restful.
but finally roused herself to go to bed just before 11 p.m. As she stretched out like a starfish in the double bed she had shared with her husband until he had been called up 2 days earlier, she was thoughtful.
So this is war. Unsatisfied desire and a sense of frustration. No stimulating change of duty, no ennobling thoughts, no sense of humour.
So began what Churchill called the Twilight War, and what later came to be universally known in a phrase borrowed from America as the Phony War. It was a time of rumour and uncertainty, and it did not seem like real war on the home front because war in the shape it had been sketched did not materialise. There were no bombed cities and no charnel house of flame and death. Yet.